Welcome to Everything Life Coaching with John Kim and Noelle Cordeaux, founders of JRNI Coaching. If you're inspired to begin your own life coaching practice or just want to learn a little bit more about what it's all about, visit jrni.co. That's JRNI.co.
Noelle, finish this sentence for me. Life is too short for...
Bullshit.
Ooh, bullshit. Okay, pass the ball back and then and
All
then we
right,
start.
John. Life is too short for...
Low thread count. I think that
Ooh.
these plastic crappy sheets that we spend money on. I mean, sleep is everything. So if you're gonna buy anything, don't buy the shoes. Buy some nice sheets.
Did you by any chance get new sheets?
No, but I actually I was having a really bad day yesterday, and I realized why I was so annoyed. I was wearing these shorts, and under the shorts, I realized I was wearing these cheap, like Target underwear that I bought temporary on a trip a long time ago, and they're not breathable. And it got me thinking, like, life is too short for stuff like this. And then it got me on this whole thought process of what life is too short for. Anyway,
Okay.
I tossed the underwear, but get the high thread count sheets. Definitely a game
Yeah.
changer.
And
Yeah.
guys, John's going to be going through all of his cotton and durable goods real soon.
Oh, absolutely. Now's the time. On today's episode, we're going to talk about self-compassion. Of course, Noelle will bring the science, and I'm obsessed with what things look like. So, how do we apply something like self-compassion?
Yeah, and I think the really interesting positioning that we're taking with self-compassion today is how you can actually use it as a superpower both in your own internal world and then in your coaching practice as a coach. And
Yeah.
it was something that I had never considered, and it was mind-blowing to me when I sat down to work things through for this episode. So I'm stoked about it.
Most people, especially people, in our line of work, but also like, nurses, any people in the helping field, they struggle with self-compassion. Why do you think that is?
Self-compassion is really interesting because so often it's kind of juxtaposed against self-esteem in
Mhm.
our consciousness. And self-esteem is wonderful to have, but compared to self-compassion, it's kind of the watered down version, and it can, chip away at you very slowly if you don't use it wisely. And when we're looking at folks in the helping profession, we give so much. We give so much of ourselves that it's real work to turn that lens inward and say, I deserve it too.
Yeah. So first of all, what does self-compassion look like for you?
For me, self-compassion was really, my concept of it was formed by the work of Kristen Neff. And she says that when you experience moments of suffering, that is the time that you need to start looking outward and relating to others, because you in your moment of suffering are not unique.
Mhm.
Everybody experiences these kinds of downs, and it's actually a way to connect to others, to other humans, to society, to our world, and say, in this moment of suffering, may I be one with all of civilization.
Wow, what a poetic definition. I love that. For me, self-compassion is to do the best you can to love yourself without judgment. And I say the best
Yes.
you can because, it's hard to do, when we're talking about our relationship with self. It's very easy to love other people, but when it comes to, ourselves, it's really hard. Can be hard.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a really interesting point. So you said to, love yourself as much as you can without judgment. And so if you're showing judgment the door, then you're creating space. And one of the things that we need to talk about is when you create space emotionally, when you get rid of some junk that you've been hanging on to for a really long time because it served you at one time, perhaps judgment served you at one time, then you need to bring something else in so it's not sitting there empty.
What else can you bring in besides judgment, which I love? I love this idea of bringing something else in because it's so visual.
Yeah. And thinking about your container theory, like, we're all empty containers. You can
Hmm.
fill your container with whatever you want. If you kick judgment out, for me personally, gosh, if I were gonna show judgment at the door, the first thing I would wanna bring in is dancing and laughter and music and
Mm,
joy.
yeah, I love that. How can self-compassion help you to better relate to others? I mean, that's basically what we're talking about when it comes to self-compassion and coaching.
Yeah. So self compassion can actually protect you from harmful events of negativity, ego threats, and
Mm.
life experiences.
How? How is that so?
Yeah, in a compassionate context, once you get the hang of self compassion and you start looking out into the world and saying, you know what, everybody suffers, you begin to internalize that
Mm,
every single human is imperfect, every single one, and every single human feels inadequate sometimes.
right.
And when we're going through these kind of a hard times, it's really easy to beat ourselves up and feel like everybody has it together except for me. But when you really get rolling with self compassion, it's like, huh, look at that. I'm imperfect just alongside the rest of humanity.
Right.
And you can really drop down and kind of form this buffer of resiliency when things start going wrong, that you don't start beating yourself up. And then also looking out at the rest of the world and saying, you know what, I'm shoulder to shoulder with everybody else who's going through this stuff.
Yeah, you know what resonates with me is when you said, internalizing. So, uh, when everyone suffers, but then I mean, suffering is part of life, of course, but when you internalize that, you think that you're defective or less than or broken, because you're going through a difficult time. I think that's where things get dangerous. That's where you have to really come at it with self-compassion.
You're right. And this is where casting the lens towards self esteem gets a little bit tricky. Because if we're clinging to positive self concepts and saying, well, I just need to build myself up, I just need to, fix whatever is wrong with me, we're not actually getting to the root of the problem, that suffering is universal. Everybody is imperfect. And if we keep drilling towards bettering ourselves, this becomes narcissistic and antisocial.
Yeah, and what a great topic, especially with what's going on in the world right now. Yeah.
Very much. I was having this conversation with my mom last night.
Mm,
And she had a social distancing gathering. She had two friends over in the backyard. And she said, she was really shocked at how leery she felt of her friends, how she felt scared having people in her backyard. And
mm.
I rarely get to share this science with my mom, but I got to tell her what I know about cows. And I said, hey, mom, humans are a lot like diseased cattle. When we separate for the herd from a really long period of time, it's in the interest of the herd to keep the sick cow away. And so we start to internalize and view social exchanges as threats.
Mhm. Do you have an old telephone that rings? Because if you do, I think that's awesome. I think or is that something else?
I have an old doorbell that rings.
Oh, awesome. Um, I love the fact that you're actually having conversations with your mom about things like self-compassion. That's amazing.
It is amazing, and it's recent. It's a recent phenomenon when she's really kind of started to look at around at the world and notice how she's feeling.
Mhm.
And she has two daughters. One is a therapist, the other is a coach. And so sometimes, just sometimes, she comes to us and says, "What do you guys think about this?"
I love that. I think it's beautiful.
It is.
So Neff defined self-compassion as comprising of 3 key components.
Mhm.
Should we go through them?
Yeah. So the formula for self compassion, according to Kristen Neff, is treating oneself kindly.
Mhm.
And and I think that this particular point is deserving of some exploration. So, what does it mean to you, John, to treat yourself kindly?
So, like, the obvious would be, to be, easier on myself, to allow myself some slack and all of that, but I also think treating myself kindly, also means self-discipline, also means the, ability to draw boundaries and say no to myself sometimes.
You're spot on. And I think it's really situationally specific. I had last week was just a horrible week, and
Mm,
I had low energy. I was struggling psychologically. There was kind of a traumatic thing that happened. And I defaulted to, okay, let's get a pizza.
Yeah,
Okay, if
sure.
I can't go for a workout, at least I'll go for a walk. And so I was definitely negotiating with myself to accommodate for the really bad week. And then once that week was over, I was like, all right, time to get back to it. Healthy meals, working out.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're absolutely right. Kind of knowing when to ebb and when to flow with it.
Yeah, so, I'm an emotional eater. I struggle with, food, ordering out, satisfying cravings all the time. So that's food and work is where I struggle. So with food, um, just, eating late at night, ordering something not because I'm hungry, but because, I just wanna taste that thing. I think that because my dad's an alcoholic, or was, I think that that kind of impulsivity and extremes and chasing that high is it's just wired in me. So, that for sure, because I beat myself up when I do, go on little binges. And then also with work, if I'm not as productive as I wanna be, I beat myself up. And so, like, recently, having a daughter, and there's 2 of us, so I'm not gonna say it's a full-time job, but maybe a part-time job. I don't see that as a job, and so because I don't have as much time as I used to, I noticed that, I label myself as being less productive, and then with that comes, you're going backwards, you're dropping the ball, you're, even like, you're a loser, like that kinda stuff. Eh,
Oh, yeah. No bueno.
no bueno, and I think that's where self-compassion, and connecting to yourself and being kinder to yourself, really kind of creates that. It gives you that vine to pull you out of that quicksand, or else you start sinking very fast.
Yeah. And do you mind if we stay with this for a minute? Because I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
it's important, and thank you for being so vulnerable. So, when we were talking about that visual of the container and you were talking just now, I was like, oh my God, John's filling his container with a whole bunch of really icky self-talk.
Mm, yeah, absolutely, and that, you're not really aware of.
That you're not aware of, and you're sitting in it and you're living with it. And I think that's maybe one of the keys here is to be genuinely looking at your life and yourself and your lived experience as your very own container. And what am I filling it with today? What do I want to fill it with instead? What do I need
Mm.
to push out of the container? And that's where I think point two comes in really strongly, is recognizing struggles as part of this shared human experience.
Do you feel selfish when you insert, healthier things into your container, or not so much anymore where you're at in your life?
Um, you know, it's interesting. On on Monday, I took the day off and I did something I haven't done in a really, really, really long time. I sat down and I read a novel. I read
Mm, nice,
Hemingway, The
nice.
Sun Also Rises. And it's a beautiful book. I read it cover to cover in one sitting.
Oh my
And
god.
then,
Holy shit.
mhm,
Wow.
mhm,
Okay.
I'm a fast reader, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed the characters, and then I poured myself a really nice glass of Spanish wine. And I had to really sit with myself and ask myself the question of why had I not allowed myself this experience of joy and enjoyment sooner?
Mm,
And so I think, for me, because I am so disciplined with work and all of the responsibilities that I have and taking care of other humans and animals and plants and my family, that I deny myself that joy. So probably my work is to bring it into the container. I don't think that I feel selfish so much as I feel that there's something better I could be doing with my time.
right. And you mentioned when you were thinking about, or when you're telling us about Spanish wine and novels, the word that came to my mind as you painted that picture was mindfulness, and that is also tied to self-compassion, right?
It very much is that you hold your painful thoughts and feelings and mindful awareness and, let them exist as part of your experience rather than stuff them
Mhm. Absolutely.
and then swap it out with something that you enjoy,
Yeah, which is a practice, of course, right?
which
Um,
is a practice.
so going back to Neff, the other 2, number 1 being treating yourself kindly, number 2 is recognizing one's struggle, struggles as a part of a shared human experience. And Noel mentioned this earlier. Just that recognition that you're whatever you're going through, you're not going through alone. That it's part of being human.
Yeah. What is that? And especially since we are now all so disconnected that,
Hmm.
kind of thinking about this from a human lens and from a coaching lens, that if we can somehow mentally, emotionally, and intellectually harness the fact that we are all right now part of a shared human experience,
Oh yeah.
does it make you feel more connected?
Absolutely, and I think this is kind of a huge part of coaching is, um, without the announcement, getting your client to feel that he or her is less alone in the world, just because you are kind of doing
Mhm.
life with them in a way.
Oh, very much so. And being able to, going back to the first point, treat yourself kindly actually gives you a better foundation to be of service to someone else, because you're not
Right.
beating yourself up. You're able to see the world through an optimistic lens. You're doing your part of self care, taking care of yourself so that you can hold the light up for somebody else.
Yes, and, just leading naturally onto the third one, you're holding one's painful thoughts and feelings in mindful awareness. So, just this idea of holding space as a coach, that is self-compassion.
Oh, yeah, and so painful thoughts and feelings. Let's tackle this one. Because it sucks. It sucks when you're in pain. It absolutely sucks. There have been so many moments over the last, couple months where I've really just sat down and cried, for lots and lots and lots of different reasons, whether it was a news piece or the state of the world or an injustice that I saw or a personal, hardship or something with somebody that I love. And, you know, I find that there can be exquisite beauty in pain.
That is, that's a game changer, this idea that there's a beauty in pain, because most people, when they feel pain, that's when they sink, that's when their mindset changes, that's when they feel hopelessness. But to actually, believe that there's beauty in pain kind of then gets you to lean into it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And, I'm a highly sensitive person, super duper duper sensitive. I
right.
cry all the time. And, just to kind of look at myself in context and instead of holding the view of, what the hell is wrong with me? Why can't I just snap it back together and do what I have to do, to really sit there and say, this is who I am. I am so compassionate that I'm shedding tears because I feel so deeply. And it's
Mm,
part of my own tapestry of life.
yeah. So, guys, I want to kind of end with this, just bullet points of the outcomes of self compassion as a practice, and of course, like mindfulness and self betterment in general, it is a practice, right? It's not a light switch. It's not something that you accomplish once. It's a lifestyle. Um, Everyone has negative experiences and thoughts from time to time. A practice of self compassion shapes how one chooses to respond to those thoughts when they arise. Um, for example, it is entirely possible to decide to act kindly towards oneself, even in the pressure of unfavorable thoughts. And then finally, research shows that people high in self compassion may be less likely to fuse, or become entangled with negative self concepts.
Yeah.
It's almost like self compassion. It protects you. Going back to that container idea that I've been talking about. It almost acts as an invisible force field for your growth.
It really does. It's like rubber, you know?
Hmm.
Remember that saying when we were little, "I am rubber, you are glue.
Glue. Yeah.
Whatever you say
Right.
bounces off of me and sticks to you." Guys, that's what self-compassion does.
I love it. I love how Noel takes a concept like self compassion and, puts it into the third grade, which is simplifying, which is great because that's what I gravitate toward. Listen, guys, if
Yeah.
you guys, are practicing self-compassion, if you guys find that it's actually one of your superpowers, know that it's also a coaching tool. And if you are, great at being compassionate towards yourself, you can also, help others be compassionate toward themselves. And that whole process, of course, is empowering.
Yes, come see us at JRNI Coaching. This
Yeah.
is all about creating that safe space as a coach and within our community for each other. We love to have these conversations.
Yeah. And as a reminder, guys, for the rest of the week, and Noelle and I will do the same, practice self-compassion.
Ready to cut through the BS of becoming a coach? Snag John and Noelle's 6-step guide to becoming a life coach at jrni.co/everything. That's jrni.co/everything. If what you've heard here today speaks to you and you want to learn a little bit more about becoming a coach, visit jrni.co, jrni.co. We've graduated nearly 1,000 coaches and offer vibrant community, strong lifetime support, and world-class coaching education. We're fully ICF accredited and look forward to watching how you use coaching to make a bigger impact in the world around you.